Hi, welcome back. I'm Jen. I'm a holistic family consultant. I work with queer, non-monogamous, and neurodivergent families to help everyone find joy and thrive in their relationships together. And this week, for Week of Visibility for non-monogamy, we're looking at polyam parenting looks like. Today, we're talking to Ghost. Ghost, will you tell me a little bit about who you and your family are and what your relationships are looking like right now?
Yeah. Hi, I'm Ghost. My pronouns are they, them. Um, dive right in with my family structure is kind of odd these days because both of my spawn now are legal adults. I've been non-monogamous for 20 years-ish. And so I've gone through different labels and things like that. But it's been their entire lives. They've never known anything but non-monogamous parents. I am a single parent living with both of my spawn. And then as far as my relationships, it's different. I identify as a polyamorous relationship anarchist. So my relationships can be vastly different from any of the stereotypical relationship dynamics. That doesn't mean I don't have romantic relationships, they're just not the only type of relationship. Excuse me.
So I'm curious about how have you gotten to this point? I mean, you said that your kids, this is all they've known their whole lives, but
Mhm.
has it looked the same way? Like, were you already a relationship anarchist before having kids, or what does that evolution to this point look like?
Um, so I started a little bit more in the swinging realm, pre-kids, and when my spawn were very little, quickly developing more or evolving more into polyamory adjacent, um, in the like very hierarchical mindset at first, quickly evolving away from that into more of the clear polyamory world, and then from there evolving into relationship anarchy just as I learned more about myself, became more vulnerable with myself and within my relationships.
It's a really common arc that I hear from
Yeah.
people. Um, and it's fun to talk to people at different points along that journey and see where they are. I'm curious about how because my personal experience was like almost the opposite, where I came to a lot of the parenting philosophy that I have first, and then that like how I want to be in relationship with my kids has informed how I want to relate to adults.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm curious, like, what has that interplay been like with you about like as your evolution in your adult relationships has happened, has that changed how you parent or how you interact with your kids or vice versa? Has there been any back and forth with that?
I think it's been more of learning how I interact with my spawn has affected my relationships outside of them. Um, I I've questioned monogamy since I was 13, so the monogamy, non-monogamy perspective has just been like figuring out what labels fit, but how I've relationshiped and parented with my spawn has influenced a lot more of how I relationship with adult relationships, friendships, and all of that. Even business, professional relationships.
Yeah, it's really cool how kids can be that lens into like becoming more how we want to be in all
Yeah,
aspects of life.
absolutely.
Is there anything that you found uniquely challenging, like that you think monogamous parents or kid-free poly folk don't have to deal with?
Um, in most senses, I don't think there are unique to non-monogamy issues, I wouldn't say. Um, but when we throw in children, there is a different perspective that we might overlook um, in any form of relationship. But being adaptable in making sure we have trusted childcare when our children are as our children are younger and need that. If we're, a one parent household and something comes up where our childcare falls through, now our plans have to be adapted. Or even in a two-parent household, if the other parent gets stuck at work, there's the plans have to be adapted. Where in when we consider people just friends, we often overlook those kind of things. There's my judgment coming out. um, but we often overlook those relationships and how we relationship within them, in those instances of we are still asking people to be adaptable and flexible if something comes up and we have to either postpone or cancel or just adjust plans in general, um, that we don't really think about until we're looking at more intimate relationships, usually when it's romantic relationships that we start to consider that, and we collectively as a society. um,
Yeah, and one of the things that I hear there is, and one of the things I see is a lot of times people are more willing to include their kids in time with friends
yep.
and not with romantic partners. And of course, there are spaces in which the kids should not be included, of course, like in the bedroom.
Hmm.
But there's plenty of time that we spend with romantic partners that is, time that theoretically could include kids. And we can also preserve kid-free adult one-on-one time with friends. But
Hmm.
because we have this societal lens of, these relationships deserve this like focused attention without children interrupting, and these relationships don't need that. um, which relationships get the child care and the limited kid free time can
Yep.
be, yeah, really
Yep.
colored by those
It's
assumptions.
well, and we put this like unique, um evaluating of trust when it's a romantic partner. And a lot of things you read on polyamory and non-monogamy is, oh no, what if your kids become attached to your partner and you break up? Well, my kids might become attached to a friend and I lose contact with that friend. It's no different. It is still them developing a relationship and then having to navigate and negotiate like how disentanglement works between me and the other party, and accounting for the relationships that my spawn may or may not have had in that, um, that we disregard in friendships a
Mhm.
lot. Like we don't really consider the impact on our kids when it's again just friends. Um,
Right.
but to them, that's still a relationship, that's still potentially a trusted adult that then they are losing because I don't want to be friends with them anymore. Instead of like in non-monogamy and when we're relationshiping ethically in any form, having those conversations and navigating, okay, I can put my feels aside because my kid still trusts this person and still is attached to that person, and then they can have, a better say in who is and isn't in their lives.
Yeah, and there's so much there about unpacking monogamist ideas. I mean, I'm just like so many directions because there's one piece, like absolutely, that as far as kids are concerned, adults that they care about and trust are adults they care about and trust, period.
Hmm.
But there's an assumption, I think, if you were a single parent who's monogamous and you're dating someone and you are going up the escalator and they're eventually going to like become a step parent and live in your home and also like provide daily parenting to your kids, and that's like an eventual goal, then yeah, that might be a different kind of relationship to your kids than like a friend who comes over once a week or something. Just the fact that they're there every single day and involved in different ways in a child's life. So that's one monogamous idea, that like if you're dating someone and you're polyamorous, they're not necessarily going to be any of those things. They might see your kid less often than a lot of friends see your kids. And so that's one monogamous idea to unpack. And then another is, I think there's an assumption in monogamy that friendships don't end, which obviously they do sometimes, but there's an assumption that like oh, well, my friend will always be in my child's life versus someone I'm dating. If we break up, that means like we never have contact again, because that's
Yeah.
usually what monogamous breakups look like. And that's another thing that we get to both, embrace the reality of sometimes friendships end or at least become less frequent or people move away. That doesn't necessarily mean there's like a big like blow up or something, but
Mhm.
also that romantic relationships can change form and not necessarily be a breakup in the we're never speaking again sense.
Right. Well, and we also often discount the fact that our kids are losing trusted adults every year if they're in public schools. They have that trusted teacher and recess aide that the next year they have a different teacher and possibly a different recess aide. And then when they move, from elementary to middle school and middle school to high school, like those are drastic changes and those trusted adults are no longer in their lives. But we never consider that in the monogamous realm. Like
Right.
it's the same thing. It's still a trusted adult in your child's life that then is not being discussed and like, navigated in that way.
Yeah. But again, that's the relationship hierarchy. Like that's not a significant or important relationship in a monogamous hierarchy of
Right.
of who matters. Even though I'm sure most of us can remember a teacher when we were kids who really super duper mattered. Um, I'm curious
Mm-hmm.
if somebody else is, watching this and considering that being a polyamorous or ethically non-monogamous parent might be a path they want to follow or consider. Is there something you'd offer them, wisdom that you've gained along the way so that they can, um, maybe not have to figure it all out for themselves?
I mean, I think every child is different, and parents are usually pretty in tune with how their children need to have these bigger conversations. And it doesn't have to be big, but also keeping in mind like that children are more perceptive and more resilient than us adults like to give them credit for. Um, Keeping the lines of communication open with our children helps them to have at least a baseline of understanding of what relationships are looking like and what this could mean to them, as well as like what it means in their lives and giving them a little bit of a say. Like, obviously, they're not going to have a say in your life and what you're doing, but giving them a say of like, hey, I'm going on a date with this person. I've been dating this person for whatever amount of time, and I feel trusting in letting them in our home. How do you feel? What do you need around that? Building that trust as well as the vulnerability with them, because I think a lot of parents, a lot of times us as parents forget to be vulnerable with our kids, and we're trying to protect them from so much in the world, that we forget to include them in that and letting them see us as human as well.
Yeah, that's great. And then, so we've talked a little bit about challenges, and I'm curious about what are the benefits that you see for your kids or for your family, and what makes this the right choice for you and your family and your kids.
Um, I feel like mostly the right choice because, or it is the right choice because, like it is truly part of my identity. But the way I've gone about it and having those open lines of communication has been the right choice with my kids because it has allowed them to navigate the way they relationship and what it means to them. And how they relationship. It doesn't like monogamy, non-monogamy doesn't matter, but how they relationship in each of their individual connections with people and how they build those and how like what types of trust and vulnerability they're building within those different dynamics.
Yeah, makes sense. Thanks for sharing with us, Ghost.
Of course.